Mike, what? Guess what day it is, folks? Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you have all been waiting for, the reason you're here, the reason Waterbox decided to go into business is to be here for this moment today. First of all, I want to say, if anybody wants to take a selfie, Mike will be in the back after. You can get a picture with him. Be sure not to miss that. He will do signatures. Signatures are $5, pictures are free. Globally renowned, over 100 million followers, huge household name in Germany. Mike from Aquapros, saving the best for last, YouTuber extraordinaire, freshwater god. Mike, take it away. Don't get music. I feel like they needed something big.
You're too much.
Big hand of applause. Let's go.
Too much credit. Too much credit. Too much credit. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I got to give a quick shout out to Lindsay, Melanie, Thor, Jane, Loki, Friend, and HC at home watching. Appreciate it very much. Also, everybody online tuning in. Thank you. Everybody here. Thank you, Rich and the Waterbox people, for making this happen. And it's been a really fun weekend. First time in Florida. So we got a mix of weather. It was fun. So who am I and why am I here? Good question. So Waterbox sponsors my YouTube channel, and that is called Aquapros. If you're interested in freshwater aquariums, aquascaping, any of that kind of stuff, you can check that out if you want to. Just a quick showing of hands. How many people here have freshwater tanks now or started there? Right? Okay, so like most people, that's kind of the gist that I get. I don't know what happens. You get reefer madness and then you never turn back. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I'm sure at some point it will. So I've been doing social media full time for the last 2 years. It's been an interesting journey. Before that, I don't have a Velociraptor yet. It's a goal of mine. But before that, I was a microbiologist. I worked in the frozen food industry for a couple of years. And before that, I was getting my master's degree where I studied nitrifying bacteria. So that's kind of my link to all of this. So my talk today is going to be on the modern freshwater aquarium, or my interpretation of that. We're also going to talk about aquascaping and some fun stuff like that. So to me, the modern planted aquarium is a planted one. So live plants, rocks and driftwood, real materials. We're also going to kind of talk about high-tech versus low-tech tanks and what all goes into that. And we're going to talk a lot about aquascaping because that's my favorite thing to do. So first, I want to give a little bit of background just for those that aren't super familiar with freshwater tanks, planted tanks. Takashi Amano is probably the biggest influence on this hobby, world famous aquascaper. He brought most of what we do today to the foreground, and so we have to acknowledge him. He's actually no longer with us. I believe he passed away in 2015, but a lot of everything that we do goes back to him, and we'll show some stuff with him. This is a picture of him with his tank at his home, which is a super famous tank. I also wanted to mention the IAPLC, which is the big international aquascaping contest that takes place every year. The bottom picture here, one of my acquaintances, actually one of my pretty good friends, John Peeney. This is his 2017 entry into that contest. And so you can see from that picture just the amount of intricacy that goes into an award-winning or one that hopes to win an award. Just a tremendous amount of detail. Everything is placed in a specific way, and this kind of highlights the niche within the niche within the niche of fish keeping. So you keep fish, you keep freshwater fish, you're into planted tanks, then you get into aquascaping. So it's several layers down, but it's what it's all about, for me at least. And then, with freshwater aquariums, you have there's all kinds. You have species-specific tanks. For instance, like a discus tank, you might only keep discus, and that's your thing. Freshwater pufferfish is another example. You can always mix and match, and you end up with a community tank, which I think is what most people end up having. Things like shrimp-specific tanks, beta aquariums. You can also mix and match with those as well. But everybody's into something a little bit different. And that's another reason why I love this hobby. And for me, it's all about aquascaping. So this is an example of a nano aquarium that's also a shrimp tank, but it's also a fish aquarium because there are some fish in there. I think at this point it did, maybe it didn't, but this is also a nano aquarium, so it kind of takes every little aspect and molds it into its own specific thing. And it's a cool little forest tank that I built. But then, like I've mentioned, aquascaping is the cool thing that I'm really into now. And so there's several different types and styles of aquascaping that I just wanted to go over. And so this isn't all of them, but you have the nature style, which is what Takashi Yamano really brought forth. And then you have Dutch style. Indonesian style is a really cool one, and we're going to show my attempt at an Indonesian style aquascape in a Waterbox aquarium here in a couple slides. You have Iwagumi, and then, like I said, there's a lot of other styles and new styles that are emerging. But I think what most people end up doing is just kind of like a freestyle scape. You don't go into it wanting to do something specific, at least for me most of the time. So I include like freestyle, or you could call it a no-style aquarium if you want. But so here's a tank by Takashi, just highlighting the nature style. You see it's just trying to emulate nature, right? There's several different plants in this tank. And then if we go and check out this one, this is, again, a nature style tank by him as well, but it's a little bit more simple. It only has maybe 4 or 5 different types of plants in it. And I think these kind of aquariums appeal to most people. And then the Dutch style this is a tank that I did a long time ago. The Dutch style is primarily, it's just groups of plants. And some people really like that. I messed up because I put a piece of wood in it. I don't think you're technically supposed to do that, but you can get away with it. Here is another kind of like a Dutch style tank. This is a display tank at Aquarium Co-op. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Corey. He runs a YouTube channel that's really popular as well. He's a store owner as well. Here's another tank that I did several years ago. This was in my, kind of when I started to get introduced to the whole aquascaping thing, I was really getting into it. And this is, just an example of kind of something that I threw together with a bunch of different elements. So there's a lot of these Java ferns. There's kind of like a tree on one side, and then just, it's whatever you like. I think at the end of the day, this whole aquascaping thing, you can get really into it, but it's really just about what you enjoy looking at and having in your home. So here's another tank from a while ago, just kind of like a mix of everything. This was a nice community tank with some tetras, there's some swordtails, some rainbow fish, and some other fish as well. Here's a really cool tank by a friend of mine named George Farmer. He's another pretty famous aquascaper from the UK. And so the Iwagumi layout, I think, is pretty cool. It's also really simple. It involves using specific numbers of stones, each having their own weight in the aquascape. I believe this is like a 7-stone Iwagumi. I mean, it's super simple. One type of plant, I believe that is a Monte Carlo, which is a creeping plant that kind of spreads out along the substrate. And then it just looks like it has either some neons or some cardinals in there. One of the styles that I really, really like, though, is the Indonesian style. It's a little bit of a newer style, and this is a scape by Mr. Fukuda, who, I mean, you can see from this, it's super intricate. It's rocks, it's wood, all of it's glued together. It was probably assembled outside of the tank and then set inside of it. And then the amount of plants in here, the different species, it's just incredible. And the whole thing with these styles is to make kind of like a fantasy world inside of an aquarium, which I think is super awesome. So an attempt at doing that, not exactly an Indonesian style scape, but this was my first attempt at making an Avatar themed aquarium. So it's funny to look back at this thing, but the rocks you see are a pumice, and so connecting a rock to a stick with glue, you couldn't do this with like a river rock, right? In water, it's still going to have a lot of tension on there, but this pumice was so lightweight that you could go rock, stick, rock, stick, rock, stick, and create this crazy stuff. This one was my first attempt. You can't see it, but there's like a lattice on top, and they're held up by fishing line. And so that ended up not really needing to be what it needed to do, but you know, it's just going through trial and error and figuring out things work. So this was the first attempt. 2 years later, this was my second attempt. And this one, rather than using fishing line to hold those rocks, it was just all connected by stick, rock, a lot of glue. And you know, just how you guys use, you can use super glue to do frags, right? So same thing here, we use super glue to glue plants to things, and we glue sticks to rocks. And I make that joke that that's what I do for a living, is glue stuff together. So then a few months later, the scape looks like this. I mean, just a lot of different types of mosses and small epiphytes and some grass down on the bottom. And so this was also a shrimp tank where we eventually added some nanofish to it. Just a pretty fun one. So then fast forward to, rewind to about a year ago. Here's a kind of a dumb picture of me standing in front of my really cool Waterbox Clear Pro 7225, the largest freshwater tank that Waterbox makes, and I had the plan to set out to create like my biggest scape, my most elaborate scape yet, and I wanted to call it Ancient Gardens. You gotta give a scape a really pretentious name like that if you want it to look good, right? So here was the hardscape. So we started out with a lot of dragonstone. That's the kind of the orange colored rock that you see in there. And then we have all these prefab bonsai trees, which are really cool. And before I got into using this as a material, I thought they were real bonsai trees because they look so realistic, but they're actually all handmade. You can find them at various retailers. Not everybody has them, but they're really, really cool. And so I started with the idea that I wanted to create kind of like that Indonesian kind of fantasy world type scape in this big aquarium. And so fast forward a little bit here to where we have some of the roots connecting the trees. We get the substrate in there. We get smaller rocks broken up in the front to kind of add some detail. And yeah, then we plant it. And so this was right off the bat. We used that Monte Carlo, if you remember when we were looking at that George Farmer Iwagumi, that I thought that was that Monte Carlo down in the substrate. Well, it turns out that you don't have to grow it down in the ground. And so what I did was I put it in the trees instead of using something like a moss, which is what a lot of people do. Wanted to try something a little different. And we have this really cool backlight system on there too, so it helps kind of make it extra crazy looking. And if we go forward about, I think like 6 months, this is what it ended up looking like. We changed out a few things. We changed the foreground plants to a smaller hair grass, but yeah, this is a pretty fun one. You like this tank, right, Rich? Good, man. So as I'm still kind of developing this talk, this is the first time I've given it, so I hope it's been okay so far. I'm gonna try to transition into just talking about the high-tech and the low-tech aquariums, because I think that's something that people are into, especially the super nerdy people who are all about the different parameters of aquarium. I know how you reef people are. You love your parameters and things like that, right? So this is the freshwater equivalent. This is about as nerdy as you can get. So a high-tech tank, just in case you're unfamiliar, is usually a tank that has a strong light source. You're adding carbon dioxide to help grow your plants faster. You're typically going to add fertilizers if you're doing that. And doing this style of a tank allows you to have a little bit more of a wider variety of plants. And so most of those like crazy scapes that are in the contests, they're all going to be high-tech tanks for the most part. Most of the tanks that I do are high-tech as well, just because I think it's a little fun to do. So low-tech being the opposite of that. You don't necessarily have high lighting. You could if you wanted to, but the idea is you're not adding stuff to it. So in theory, it should be a lower maintenance aquarium. But as I kind of do some experiments and some comparisons, I don't always find that to be the case. So hopefully once I get that information, I can add this to the talk and have it be a little bit more comprehensive. But here is an example of two side-by-side tanks that I have right now, where the parameters are all the same, the plants are all the same, everything is as close to the same as possible. One just has CO2 and the other one does not. And so you can see pretty clearly here that adding CO2 does a lot to your tank as far as the plant growth rate. the reds in the rotala there on the, I don't know if that's your left or your right, but you know, deeper, darker red color. And so this is just part of what I do on my channel is try and teach stuff and do, you know, unique things to showcase different aspects of the hobby. So currently working on this right now, and hopefully one day I'll have more to show on it. I just wanted to kind of bridge into some of the current things that are, you know, that I find popular on the internet and just throughout the aquascaping world in general. This happens to be an aquarium that I did a long time ago. That was one of my favorites. It was my desert style aquarium. So this is starting out the hardscape, just literally some random rock that I found outside. You can use just about anything, honestly, in a freshwater tank. A little bit of gluing, and then fast forward to once it was planted, I made little cactuses out of finding the perfect pieces of wood and then breaking them, and they had just the right angle. It took forever, but I think the end result was pretty cool. I really enjoyed this one. A shrimp tank, we ended up putting some, like theming out the livestock. So we had black shrimp, those were the scorpions. We had some, I think they're brown or black coolie loaches. Those were the snakes in the desert. So we try and have fun with stuff. Another thing that's kind of new, at least to me, is this group. You can find them on Instagram as Aquaman Nature Studio. And what they do is they make use of the Marimo moss ball, which is actually this algae. They break it apart and they use it pretty much exclusively to cover different landscapes, make trees, and I just think this is something that I find people are becoming really interested in because it's, you know, it's an easier thing to do. You know, moss balls are easy to get, and you can create something beautiful like that, and so that's something that's on my radar for sure. Here's a couple tanks by a gentleman that goes by Shrimpery on Instagram. I really like some of his stuff. This is his take on the pond aquarium. So you can see we have a tank that's half full on the left. And you have a lot of these pond plants, water celery, Japanese bloodgrass. You get the emergent growth, but then you have still a freshwater aquarium on the bottom. He likes to use rice fish because they don't tend to jump. If you look at the other tank, you can see that that one's all the way up to the top. So you definitely don't want to have fish that are jumping out. But I think this is a really popular style. He's definitely had a huge influence on it, and I think you're going to see a lot more of it in the future. Kind of similar to that, paludariums are, I think, really growing in popularity right now. This is a tank who's by MD Fish Tanks, another one of my buddies on YouTube. He's doing a lot of really fun stuff. And so you can see he's got his freshwater tank there down on the bottom, and then he has a lot of these like butter ferns up top. And so this is, I think, some pretty cool stuff. I'm going to try and do some in a Waterbox Terra this year that I have. I've been hiding it. Okay, so another thing that's kind of recently new in the last year are these little mini complete tanks. And I don't know if you've seen these. Here you can see my buddy Tanner's hands for the size comparison, but this is a tiny little tank that has a functional sump on the bottom, and it has a little like USB light on the top, and it has overflows and returns and everything. So he made a little like paludarium kind of riparium thing in it, and like those are pieces of Anubias Nana Petite too, for like a size reference. Tanner's got a really cool YouTube channel. If you like moss, you should definitely check out Serpent Design. Here's another picture of the tank done by Oliver Knott, another really famous aquascaper. A little action figure there for size, and this is just, you know, it's completely filled with water, just a little tank. And so while you probably wouldn't want to keep any livestock in it, I think something like this is just really cool. Just have it on your desk if you're into aquariums. I don't think you can't be into this. So that is the talk. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about Planet Takes.
Big round of applause. If you've ever wondered what it was like to be in the presence of greatness, you now know. Questions? A lot of questions, I'm sure. Not everybody at once, please. Where? Up here. Okay.
Wait, do you want to say something about tissue cultured plants at all? Their availability, any new varieties coming up?
Yeah, tissue. Ooh, whoa, hello. Feedback. Okay. Thank you, Keenan. Tissue culture plants. I've used them a lot in the past. My take on it is that you can either get good ones or you can get bad ones. I don't really even think that I can say like I surely don't want to say a certain brand is not better than another. It seems to be like you can get a tissue culture plant that's relatively new from when it was made, and you might be more successful with that. It also depends on the type of plant too. When I use certain tissue culture plants, I have not a very good turnover with them transitioning out of that emergent growth on that rich media that they're on. And so, I mean, they can be hit or miss, is ultimately what I'm trying to say. So, you know, certain plants like the stem plants, I think tend to do a little bit better than like you look at like the dwarf baby tears, those especially have a harder time of transitioning, but it depends on a lot of factors, so.
Follow-up question, what's a tissue cultured plant?
Yeah, so a tissue culture plant is like, think of a petri dish with bacteria growing on it, and then like forget that I said that there was bacteria growing on it and replace that with a plant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Over here.
So for a large planted tank, what are your thoughts on using a sump versus a canister filter?
I think you could totally use a sump if you want to. I think there's a lot of cases where it's kind of overkill. I think it's really just your personal preference, right? Like one time I had a 55, and just for the heck of it, I had a 10-gallon sump on it that was like siphon driven, and it was like totally the most dangerous thing ever. But it was a fun experience to try that and to have that. I don't think it's really necessary, but it's not going to detract from anything if you want to do that.
Anyone else?
Mike, how long have you been running your YouTube channel? I mean, you have over 250,000 subscribers, so it's a huge number.
Yeah, thank you. I started back in 2013, beginning of 2014, and that was before I did my 2 years of grad school. So I started the channel, and then I stopped doing it for like a year and a half, 2 years while I was in grad school because I just couldn't do it. And then I came back and got some motivation and figured it out somehow, some way.
And a question about black or beard algae.
Sure.
What's the current best treatment for that?
Blackbeard, I mean, hydrogen peroxide, you know, it like, everybody has, some people are scared to use bleach. I totally get it. I mean, there's obvious dangers with that. Same with hydrogen peroxide. You can kill your fish if you overdose it. But I think like the best case scenario with Blackbeard, once you get it, it's hard to like tweak a parameter and then get rid of it. So the physical removal is, at least in my opinion, the best and maybe even the only way to really get rid of it. And you know, what I would say is I would just hope that it's on a surface that you can remove from the aquarium to do any kind of, you know, chemical dosing. A lot of people also use Seachem Excel, so their CO2 supplement. It's like a glutaraldehyde compound, and then you still have to overdose that in your aquarium, which some people are cool with, some people aren't. So, I know Blackbeard algae's tough, man. Algae's a bummer, for sure.
Who's next? Anyone? Oh. Jacob.
Uh-oh.
Thank you, Peter. Mike, it's not nothing too serious, but I was just wondering if you have like a favorite substrate that you like to use, and do each one of these styles have a specific substrate that go with each style?
Yeah, I mean, I typically use active substrates, which, let's see if we can, like for example, in the experiment takes, this happens to be a Brightwell substrate. And I mean, you have ADA substrate, you have UNS makes a similar substrate to the Brightwell stuff. For the most part, they're all relatively the same, with the exception being the ADA stuff. I think it might have some added nitrogen to it. That's why you see kind of like an ammonia spike with that stuff. But the active substrates, just in case if you're new to this whole thing, it softens the water a little bit. So if you're somebody that has really hard water, this can drop it down a little bit. I mean, the harder your water is, the harder it is going to be to drop it down. But yeah, I like an active substrate. I used to use dirt. So like in this, where's that one old tank? And did I skip it? Oh, I skipped it. Anyway, soil in this aquarium, you probably can't see that, but there's a soil layer, and then there's just sand on top. So there's a lot of different things you can do. The active substrates are nice because you can pull a plant out and not have to worry about soil coming out or anything like that. But to drag this answer out even longer, this tank right here, it just had sand. So yeah, sometimes you can get away with that.
Anyone in the back?
Hello, hello. I got 2 questions for you. First, it was an awesome talk. If you do big water changes using RO water, do you then add electrolytes back in or any solution, or you just fill it with straight RO DI water? And then my second question is, what do you recommend for backgrounds? I see a lot of really cool bluish white films. Do you buy them online? Do you go to Home Depot and just buy window tint?
Yeah, for sure. So to answer your first question, if you're going to do RO, you need to remineralize. I'm super lucky in that my tap water is like primo for freshwater tanks. It's like pH 7. My alkalinity is on the lower side. And so, yeah, if you're somebody that has super hard water and you're forced to use RO, you do need to remineralize it. There's a lot of products out there to do that. And then to answer the background stuff, like for example, on this tank, on the Waterbox tank, we're using a Current USA backlight kit, and so it's just like any other LED light, but it's a bar that sits on the back of the tank, and you can change the colors. I've also made my own out of just like Amazon LED strips. You just have to figure out how to position it right. I ended up putting it onto a styrofoam piece and then like clamping it under the stand. So like totally janky, but it worked for a while. Some of the aquariums have, like that, the window tint film or whatever on the back. I haven't really done that all that much. I just get like a piece of construction paper and cut it out and put it on, so yeah, all kinds of stuff you could do.
Anyone else? All right, folks. Aquascaper to 4 living presidents, my personal spiritual advisor, and recently knighted Sir Fish Tank Mike from Aquapros. Subscribe or you'll regret it. Good job, buddy.
Thank you, sir.
Huge round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
Huge thank you again. What a unique, awesome event. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank